You said something that was pretty amazing in the last interview, and you said that the Biden administration would be collapsing in the fall. Do you have any more data on that? Could you
Yeah,
explain some more of that?
that's an economic issue. Okay, so empires, we exist and have since 1972. We exist on the petrodollar empire, and that empire is dying very rapidly, and we're in the very final phases of that death. And in that final phase, we reach hyperinflation. We're at the point where hyperinflation has broken loose. It's now reported at about 5.4%, but it's really hyper. It's really at least 3 times that, if not 4 times that. Energy, for instance, since Biden took over, is up 40% here on the West Coast, measured in the form of premium zero-E gasoline. That's up 40%. We're now reaching a point where the escalation of the inflation necessary to run parallel with the debt is going to reach an extreme, and this extreme, by my calculation, should impact the Biden administration in some form of a catastrophic crises around the last half of September.
What do you think that crisis may be?
Fundamentally, it'll be the inability to pay for things factually or legally. It'll be a situation where the hyperinflation has so outpaced normal expectations that all of the government contracts in the computers, which have limits and constraints placed on them, will have blown beyond those limits and constraints, and the government will actually not be able to write checks because the computers will refuse to print them. It's a crude way of explaining it, but basically the software that people have written over the past 30 years here for the government, much of it has constraints.
Oh my God! And this is how you're talking that the federal economy is going to grind to a halt.
Correct. And then it's going to it'll get even worse, right? So let's presume we have to presume so much because everybody lies to us. So we have to presume that inflation is far higher than the stated amount. And if we were to look at John Williams' shadow stats, we would see that we would probably very soon be approaching 30 or 40% inflation so far this year, in a general sense, on most of the things that the federal government is going to have to buy. And I've done some calculations, again, based on John Williams' figuring, and I did these back in January, and it would seem that it would indicate an end of September period where all of the contracts for all these various sundry things will need to be redone and the software revisited and it won't matter what agency you're dealing with. It'll be across the federal government.
Whoa! And then you said it will bleed out into the rest of the economy. How does it bleed out? What does it look like in the rest of the economy?
It'll hit the wages of the employees first. Okay, so the federal employees will be hit hard all the way across.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Jose Prado, Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I really do appreciate it because today's video is going to be really, really important. So I would really appreciate it if you would share this information with your friends and family all throughout your social media so they can also get this information and start preparing. Because, you know, there's a lot of data and a lot of things coming out of South Africa, which we're going to be talking about here today. And quite frankly, a lot more people need to start getting involved in preparedness. You know, we need to start making it to where it becomes part of American society, because every time I see something like is happening in South Africa, or let's say in the United States or in Europe or any other place, really the answer to those problems is preparedness. And I'm very confident in saying something like that, because that's exactly what proves that the prepper community and the prepper movement is doing the right thing by preparing for events that could happen. And, you know, what I'm going to be showing you here today proves that everything that I'll be teaching you here is actually correct, is the right way to do it, is the right foundation. The 14 categories do play a role in the preparedness, you know, on any type of event that may happen. And again, South Africa proves that. And I'm not saying that just to pat myself on the back and, you know, what a good job I'm doing. What I'm saying is that I'm not wasting your time by making this podcast. I'm not wasting my time doing this podcast. So what I'm actually doing is bringing you information and bringing you the analysis and the actual preparedness that we should all be following, having the foundations for. So when anything happens, it doesn't really matter what it is, what scenario or anything like that happens, we will be prepared for all of it. Okay, so that's why I'm a big believer in only really preparing for certain scenarios rather than all of them all at once or whatever. For example, we have to take care of or actually prepare for the big events, the ones that will collapse society, because you have on one extreme, preparing for an apocalyptic scenario where society collapses. You've seen the movies. People, fantasize about something like that happening. And then you have the grid, you have the supply chain, you have the system in place, which, makes life very, very easy. And we fall somewhere in between. I really do think, and, it has been proven time after time that we should be, that our preparedness should be focusing on this side, on the economic collapse, on the societal collapse, on the, Mad Max events, because when the grid fails, everything falls this direction. Okay, it doesn't really matter what it is. Everything goes towards chaos. And if you prepare for the chaos, then you're going to be prepared for everything. And again, I'm going to be showing you here with South Africa. But first, I really do want to talk about what is happening here in the United States with the inflation and how everything is going to be affecting us here very, very soon. Now, as I opened this podcast, you saw the introduction, which of course talked about a prediction that could happen sometime late September. And, this is not the only person saying it. There has been other people predicting, different aspects or different things that may be going down. But the bottom line is that you have to be prepared for all of it, or, for at least one of those things to happen. But the point is that are we anywhere near having something very serious happen in the United States? I cannot tell you that for certain. But, of course, we need to be prepared for it. All right, so one of the things I want to mention, and I want to remind you, and actually, we have about 1,000 new listeners here in the podcast. So I want to state the mission for this community of preppers under the Amendment Survival Flag, because, I really do believe that there's going to be great things coming out of this community that we have never seen coming out of the prepper community as a whole in the past. And with your support, with your help, just by simply sharing this information, it can be accomplished. All right, so our mission is to redefine and restore the prepper reputation, to create a community of well-prepared, selfless individuals around the world and become a refuge for the unprepared, not politically motivated, but all united under Jesus Christ. All right, so I want to talk about the mission real fast so you understand what I'm actually saying. To redefine and restore the prepper reputation means that, we have been made fun of for a very long time. The mainstream media, the government, the general public, and sometimes the alternative media as well. And the reason is because, there are certain people out there that I've actually read about, in Reddit. I go in there, I look at what people are discussing, the tips that they're giving themselves or, to other people. And quite frankly, some of them are very dangerous. They will not get anything accomplished. And, it's just a waste of time. So I want to make sure that, in the future, eventually we will get to the point where we will be respected again, or at least this community of preppers under the Amendment Survival Flag. And, that is the goal. And that is going to be, several years. It may take maybe a few decades, but we're going to get there. We're going to make sure that the country is going to be better off whatever happens. The next line says to create a community of well-prepared, selfless individuals around the world and become a refuge for the unprepared. All right, so what I'm meaning there is that there's going to be people who will not prepare at all. They have always become the victims when something bad happens. And even though things happen constantly in some places, they still do not do anything to prepare. So I really do believe that if we prepare properly and we take the proper steps, we can have enough of a surplus of our goods and everything else that we may produce to where we can become a refuge for the unprepared. And, for the big things like the economic collapse, let's just say that back in 1930s, when the Great Depression happened, if there was preparedness to the scale that I want to take it to, all those people would not have had suffer as much as they did back in those days. Now we're going to go into, a very difficult time, and hopefully we have enough time, or at least I have enough time to put things where I wanted them to take them. That way there's less suffering all throughout the country, and quite frankly all around the world. But we have to start small. The next line says, not politically motivated, but all united under Jesus Christ. And as you know, I'm a Christian. And, I'm not perfect or anything like that. I sometimes have difficulty talking about the gospel, because I have the lack of things to say. But especially, when it's unprompted or whatever. But my point is that I'd much rather take the Christian message, the gospel, further into other people to give them hope, and tell them about the sacrifice that Jesus have done for us, instead of talking about politics, instead of fighting about the right and the left and what policies are being done and everything else. I mean, there's nothing that we can do, at least nothing that I can do, that is going to affect anything that the government does. So what I see that is more beneficial, instead of talking about politics, talking about policy, is to prepare this community of preppers, to prepare our family, our neighborhoods, to when they screw up and we have to pay the consequences, we're going to be in a better position to withstand those consequences, those policies. And sometimes I do talk about politics when it has something to do with preparedness. For example, if some political policy will take us into war, I'm going to talk about that policy. For example, now that Joe Biden is in office, he's talking about taking guns away, all this spending that they want him to do, that is political policy, and I'm going to discuss it, and I'm going to tell you how to prepare for it. All right, so that's what I mean when I say that's when I talk about politics, but I'm only going to take it to where it really has something to do with preparedness. Other than that, I don't really care, because what really President Trump's presidency did is open my eyes to see that nothing is going to change on the right. And now that Joe Biden is there, nothing's going to change on the left. And all it's going to do is brew more conflict and possibly even making us go into a civil war. But, then we are prepared for that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the podcast, into what actually I want to talk about here today, because there's a lot of information that I got to share with you, as I mentioned in the beginning. So I want to start with the United States. And, in the previous podcast, I talked about that the banks are saying that, or actually, they confessed that there might be transitory hyperinflation. And, in the past, in historical events like the Weimar Republic, in Germany, and Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Nicaragua, and all the other places that had hyperinflation, most of the time it lasts anywhere between 12 and 18 months. And then, the politics will kick into place. And then, they'll change the currency and then bring down the zeros and everything like that. So you can kind of look at it and see that you may live in hyperinflation here in the United States for 12 to 18 months. That's if, other countries step up and they help the United States get out of the debt, which I really don't think that's going to happen because just of how enormous it is. All right. Now, there's other examples like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and others that have been in hyperinflation for a very long time. Venezuela has been in hyperinflation for at least 6 to 8 years. It depends where you want to put the timeline. That's how long it's been there. And you can rest assured that if you don't prepare properly, the crisis is going to outlast your preps, and you're going to be in the same boat as everybody else. All right. And again, I'm going to be discussing the 14 categories when we start talking about South Africa. All right, so in another podcast, what I did is that I brought you the extreme poverty and how, extremely poor people live. I got some comments on that. I disagree on some of the comments. I agree on some of the others. And what I was doing is that I'm showing you, right? I'm showing you how the most poor country is struggle to feed their population. Now, what I'm going to be doing on this one is I'm just going to give you the headlines, but I'm also going through the 6 continents on how the rich countries in those continents, all right, they're also going to be struggling or are struggling to feed their population. It's not at a critical point yet, but it's getting there. All right, so the first continent is Asia. And of course, the richest or the most powerful country is China. This from Bloomberg, and it says, China ramps up farm imports to cover domestic food shortages. All right, the next one is Africa, the continent of Africa. And the richest country there is Nigeria. And this from Al Jazeera, and it says, it is really bad. Nigerians go hungry as food inflation soars. Europe, Russia. We need our government. Surging food prices put Kremlin on edge. That's from the MoscowTimes.com. In North America, well, of course, I'm not going to talk about the United States in this because, you know, the whole podcast is about the United States inflation. But the next country that is the richest in North America or the most powerful is Canada. Food price report. Canadian families to pay $695 more for food in 2021. That's from thepigsite.com. Next, South America, which is Mexico. If coronavirus doesn't kill me, hunger will. Mexico's poor bear brunt of pandemic. That's from NPR.org. Australian continent, which of course is Australia. Australia has done little to prepare for food shortage warnings. That's from news.com.au. All right, so what I'm doing there is that I already brought you in a different podcast the extreme poverty and how that compares to how poor people in the United States live. Now I'm bringing you the rich countries, you know, the other extreme of it, and how they are also struggling. And you're going to be somewhere in between. You either in the richest countries in the world that I just mentioned, and you're in the poorest ones that I've mentioned before. And if you don't live in one of those, you're going to be somewhere in between. And your preparedness is going to make you have a higher standard of living if you prepare, you know, the 14 categories that I give you. Because when crap hits the fan, whether you're in the poorest country or the richest country, all right, everything goes towards chaos. And that's always the common denominator. That's exactly what we're preparing for. So that is the reason why you're going to fall somewhere in between. Now, here in the United States, something important happened. This from the Daily Mail, and the article's title is, America stockpiles. Supermarkets buy up to 25% more supplies as they predict inflation will soar and cost of essentials like bacon and milk rise by 14%. Supermarkets have started stockpiling food as inflation rises to its highest level in 13 years, and they predict it will get worse. Retailers are currently buying up to 25% more supplies than usual ahead of the predicted rise. Recent data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture revealed the Consumer Price Index for grocery stores and supermarkets food purchase was up 0.7% in May compared to May of last year. With concerns mounting that inflation will grow further, retailers are stocking up on inventory before prices of inventory rise. However, stockpiling then also becomes part of the problem, creating shortages that then push up the prices further. Several retailers told the Journal they are receiving only around 80% of their order from suppliers as key goods right now. All right, so that is really important that I bring you this, because for one, the grocery stores are looking into the future, right? They're preparing for the price to go up for different reasons, of course. One, they don't want to have empty shelves, and two, if they buy it right now, you know, buy low, sell high, then they're going to have better profits. And another thing that they have been doing is this shrinkflation that I've talked about here before, where the packaging, the content inside the, the goods that they're selling gets smaller, while the price, either they try to keep it the same or the price goes a little bit higher. They try to do that, they try to keep it the same level so people do not realize that things are becoming more expensive, but eventually it'll get to the point where that balance of shrinking and inflating break, and it doesn't matter how small the packaging get, the prices will still be rising. That's when we get inflation, and in some cases hyperinflation. But the point is that you and I will suffer when that actually happens. All right, so here in this article, it also said that the grocery stores are only getting about 80% because, the people who give to the grocery stores, they're running out, because some has to do with the pandemic, that places shut down, production stopped, and then that pretty much slowed the flow down the pipeline. Other has to do with the prices of the cargoes coming from outside the United States into the United States. And, that is something that Peter Schiff has actually been warned about for a very long time, saying that it's not that the price of goods are going to rise because there's a lack of it. but rather because we have so much money. You know, the American people have more money, therefore they buy more, and the imports keep coming and they increase to the point where the price of everything goes up. All right, so we have to look at those two things at once, because one is going to increase the price because there's going to be a lack, and the other one is going to be inflating the price because there's too much money. And those two combined is going to make the velocity of the money go even faster, which is going to make the hyperinflation even worse. I really do believe, though, that the hyperinflation here in the United States is going to be greater than anything that has ever been seen around the world in all of history, because of the massive debt that we have. You know, we have gotten to this level of debt that no one ever thought could ever become possible. So how much higher can it go? No idea. But just know that when it implodes, it's going to go all the way to the ground and past the ground and all the way to hell, because that's how bad it's going to get. All right, so now that we talk about all of this, you know, I want to show you this graphic, infographic, or, you know, this picture, whatever. And it says inflation from May 2020 to May 2021, so the entire year. Bacon has risen 14%, bananas 3%, bread 7%, coffee 3%, milk 8%, oranges 8%, gasoline 33%. They did oranges second time, electricity 4%. All right, and something I want to mention before I continue on, the price that came up for June is actually 5.4% from last June. So, you know, that's a pretty big increase, something that the Fed is not really talking about much, but just know that it's going to get a lot worse. And, you know, if 0.7% of these goods went up from 1 year, you know, how much more is it going to increase when it goes from whatever, well, the 5.4% from June last year. All right, but anyways, so most of the things that you're seeing on the screen, those can be grown in your own backyard. Depends on some of them depend on the weather. All right, so bacon, you can have your own livestock of pigs, and, you know, you can grow your own pigs. And once you learn how to butcher it, how to keep it healthy and everything, when it's time, you can make your own bacon, okay? And of course, you're gonna have to have your lines, so, you know, that entire pig can be distributed, because if you keep it all in the refrigerator or in the freezer, chances are that it's gonna go bad before you get to the entire thing of it. So just know that that is something that you can grow in your own backyard. Bananas, same thing, just depends on where you are. If you're in a tropical area, bananas will grow fine. Bread can be grown pretty much anywhere as long as you grow the grains in your own backyard, right? So you're gonna have to have the tools and the knowledge on how to make your own bread, but it is possible that you can make it at home. Coffee also depends on the climate. Milk, you can have the right livestock and you can make your own milk, you know, pasteurize it, put it in the refrigerator, and you're gonna be okay. Oranges also depend on the climate. Now, gasoline is going to be a lot more important, and that is not something that you can make at home. So with everything that you're going to be saving, you know, the 14% on bacon, then, you know, bananas, bread, and all of it, that's going to get the money and transfer it towards your gas, which you're going to have more money for gasoline. All right. So what I'm saying is that the things that you can grow at home is going to make it easier for you to buy the things that you cannot. All right. And the next thing is electricity. And, you know, the same thing with that, because if you have the proper solar panels, or you have the proper understanding of what you're actually going to need at home, that's actually essential for your life, for your standard of living, then it makes it a lot simpler when you're looking at a system to put in at your home. Because, you know, right now, the thinking of the American people is that they want to make sure that the house runs exactly the same off-grid as it did on the grid. And that's just sometimes not possible. I mean, you have to have a big enough, you know, battery storage capability and enough solar panels and sunlight and everything in order to be able to do that. Is it possible? Yes, it is. But will it fail you? California and Texas have proven that yes, it can. It can fail you. So you have to make sure that you narrow it down to the things that you actually going to need at home, which of course there's only two things that you really, really need. One is your refrigerator, and two, your stove. And really your stove, you can replace it with something that you can do off grid, and you're gonna be just fine. So really it's your refrigerator, okay? Can you take another step to make sure that you're not so reliant on your refrigerator? Sure, but you know, what makes it so convenient is that it can preserve food a lot better, you know, more efficiently than if you had a root cellar or, you know, something like that. Pretty much what a refrigerator does is that it keeps the bacteria at bay. It makes it grow slower to where it spoils the food a lot slower. Therefore, your food lasts a lot longer. But when you take the refrigerator out of the picture, then now you have to think, how am I going to keep this bacteria from growing so fast? And remember, the cooler that you keep your things, the better. And the best thing is a refrigerator. The next best thing is a root cellar. So again, there's steps that you can take in order to make sure that all the things that you're reliant on right now, that's on the grid, that's on the system, there's the alternative to it in your preparedness. But you have to take the steps and make sure that you have everything covered. All right, so right now I have a video that I want to show you. And the reason that this video is really important is because I want you to focus on how fast the goods that you can grow in your own backyard will grow, or, you know, will get expensive, will inflate in an inflation environment, high inflation environment, in a hyperinflation environment. All right, so this video makes it very, very clear. And again, it's from Venezuela, and Venezuela is the best data that we can get because it's happened here in modern history in the past several years. All right, so let's go look at that video real quick and we'll be right back.
A supermarket in Caracas, empty and hollow. Many shelves have been left empty as the country struggles to deal with its worst economic crisis. In the last 3 years, the economy has shrunk by a third. The government blames US-led sanctions, but the widespread view is that this is more the result of the mismanagement of the country's vast oil resources. With little food in supermarkets, it's here where Venezuelans come to find what they need: street markets. But prices here rise fast. This farmers' market is an example of hyperinflation here. That white board there had prices which have doubled or tripled in less than a month. Take tomatoes. At the beginning of the time I was in Caracas, they were sold for 45 bolivars. A few weeks later, this had risen to 100, which is 122% higher. The same with eggs. In a matter of weeks, they became 50% more expensive, passing from 32 to 48 bolivars. Economists say that it's a mixture of shortages and the lack of production from the private sector that is affecting prices in the country.
One day you find a price, and the next day it has changed.
We have to do miracles here. I'm 92 and I have to shop around different places to find better prices.
We don't know who's in charge of this mess, but we have to eat, so we have to take this.
As I was in Caracas, I did manage to find a supermarket with some food on its shelves. But this told me another story about the country's current economy. In a country with regular shortages and incredible levels of inflation, you can also find extraordinary distortions. So take, for instance, pasta, which is regulated by the state. It costs 1 cent of a US dollar. If you walk further down the shelves, you can find other goods which you may not need on a regular basis, like, let's say, slices of Victoria sponge. But this costs 2,000% more than the pasta, which is regulated by the state. And then you have the supply chain, which for shops like these is incredibly uncertain. One day, there are no eggs, there's no milk. And another day, you can only find toilet paper in every single shelf. And shops simply don't know what to do with it. Venezuela's inflation is already mind-boggling. The IMF already thinks it will close 2018 above 1 million%. And next year, the IMF's economists think it could be 10 times higher. Vladimir Hernandez, BBC News, Caracas.
All right, so that video was really, really important because, of course, it showed how things can get expensive very, very fast. But not only that, the quality of the items. For example, those vegetables, they look kind of rough. And of course, you're going to be digging through them, trying to find the best one. But if you cannot find any that look appetizing or look good, then you're going to have to do with what you got, right? The best thing that you got. And remember, those are the things that you can grow in your own backyard. And of course, Caracas and places like that, they're major cities. And that is the reason why I have always told you that your bug allocation has to be as far away from people as possible, that it has to have at the very least 5 acres so you can have enough land to grow all of the vegetables you're going to need, for you to have your livestock there without an issue, to have your alliance there or your family members there without an issue and everything like that. So that is the reason why you want to have that. And you can put yourself in the position where you're growing all those things. You can take it to market and at least make a little bit of money if you're in that type of situation. Hopefully we never get there, but more than likely we're going to, especially with all the articles that have come out with all the spending that they're doing. Now, why did we not see any type of violence when it came to food last year? The reason is because many people were being helped by the food banks, all right? So one of the things that I have actually seen and I've noticed is that if it wasn't for so many food banks all throughout the United States, which of course is a luxury that no other country has, or very few do, you know, especially if it's a third world country or a second world country, compared to the United States, you know, that luxury of having so many. If that was suddenly taken away, then people would be freaking out even more than they were last year. Because, you know, the numbers came out from food banks saying that on a regular year before the pandemic, they were helping, let's say, 300,000 people. After the pandemic, it was over 1 million. Feeding America, I think that's the right one, the right food bank, said that they went from getting donations from the grocery stores to having to actually go in there and buying the food. All right, and I have something similar here. And the reason that I want to bring this to your attention is because if or when the food banks fail in the United States, that's when I really do believe we're going to see the food riots. All right, even if the grocery stores get ransacked and there's nothing there, people are still going to be looking for that help. But when the help runs thin, and let's say the right now the food banks can feed, let's say, 1,000 people in a city or in a town. When that number gets decreased to, let's just say, 20 or 30 people, the rest of those people are going to freak out and there's going to be violence. All right. So this article is from Hedge, and it says, U.S. food banks warn soaring prices will affect distribution. Certain food prices aren't just impacting financially strapped families and the working poor. They are also affecting the mission of U.S. food banks, who are spending a lot more on food than ever before. In the coming weeks or months, food banks across the country may experience a surge in food demand from millions of folks who are set to have their stimmy checks expire. At least 25 states are ending federal unemployment benefits. The perfect storm of factors, soaring food costs and unemployment benefits expiring, may stress food banks even further. Quote, "The high prices are costing us more to feed a family in need," end quote, said Allison Paget, Development and Outreach Director at Food for Others. Quote, "We'll have to rethink our purchasing decisions because economists say the prices are going to be high for at least a year," end quote. The crisis is far from over as food bank stress begins to materialize, and not everyone might be fed this year. All right, so that's exactly what I've been saying. And you know, what I've noticed is that people are going to freak out even more when the number of people being helped is a lot less. All right, so that gives the government a window of opportunity. And of course, they're going to throw money at the issue, but they're going to continue to throw the money at it until it no longer works. Because even if they do throw, let's say, another $20 billion to all the food banks around the country, if there's no food being grown or being able to be distributed or imported or anything like that, then it doesn't really matter how much money they got. All right, so that is the reason why we have to make sure that we have our own way to resupply ourselves. Because even if you have a year's, and you should really have at the very, very least 2 years worth of food, even if you have that, chances are that the grocery stores are going to be cleaned out, that the food banks are going to be cleaned out, that the farmers are going to be cleaned out. All right, so that's what we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves right now before this issue gets any bigger. Now, the next headline that I have for you is just a headline, but this actually happened in other countries. And again, this from Zero Hedge, and the article's title is Arab Spring Redux. Bloomberg finally connects the dots. Higher food inflation leads to social unrest. And, you know, pretty much what the article is saying is that in Lebanon and, you know, other countries in the Middle East, they had issues, they had protests, they had riots because there was a lack of food. And, you know, that's exactly what also happened, or one of the things that happened in South Africa. You know, they're blaming it on the president being arrested, but, you know, people who live there and other people in Reddit and other places are saying that that is not the only reason why. Because of the pandemic, you know, in the lockdowns and everything else, the food became very difficult to come by, or more expensive, or, you know, water shortages and everything else like that also added to the stress. And that's what, you know, also encouraged people to become looters, you know, in other words. But anyways, so now we are here in, we have come to a fork in the road, because now from these issues, we can split two ways, right? And one way is, it can be that people like you and me, you know, preppers, the government, food banks, and everybody else helps to make sure that people around the community can still be fed and they can take care of themselves. Or the other one is that criminal organizations step up and they try to win the hearts and souls of the community by giving out the food that they so desperately need. All right, and that's exactly what happened in Mexico. So the next video that I'm going to be playing for you is something very important that has been happening in Mexico. This from Reuters.com, and just pay attention to the tactics of the cartel. Here it is.
Aid packages being delivered in Mexico's second largest city, Guadalajara. The pictures on the boxes are of famed drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the former cartel chief who's now in a maximum security US prison. His daughter, Alejandrina, is handing out the supplies via her company, El Chapo 701. The boxes contain oil, sugar, rice, and other essential items. The company's CEO is Julio Campos.
If we sacrifice our gross profit on each product we can help, we are not going to suffer. We will be able to refill our merchandise and people will receive our help. This is just the beginning. We know the curve of this pandemic is just starting. For Mexico, June is going to be super difficult, and we're going to continue to help.
Active members of cartels have also been courting publicity, with videos on social media showing gang members providing succor to local residents. Famed for brutality, the cartels also have a history of trying to win over hearts and minds of impoverished communities where they operate. Mexico's economy has been battered by the pandemic, and many are struggling to make ends meet as the country heads into its harshest recession in living memory. The El Chapo 701 brand gets its name from a Forbes listing in 2009 that ranked him the 701st richest person in the world at the time, with a net worth of $1 billion. El Chapo was extradited to the US in 2017 and found guilty last year on a host of drug trafficking charges.
All right, so as you saw, we have to really pay attention to this, because the cartels could actually see that to be an opportunity in the future here in the United States if the hyperinflation happens, or at least the very high inflation environment happens here in the United States, because, you know, in some places or in some items, we have had hyperinflation. For example, lumber, you know, went up like 400%. And even though that only stay there, people saw, you know, how quickly the prices can go up and how much is going to affect their wallet, especially for contractors in places like that. You know, the price of home went up by $20,000 or $40,000 from what it used to cost before that skyrocketed. All right. So that's why it's important for us to look at that. And now that you saw that Chapo Guzman is doing that in Mexico, or at least his daughter, what is happening here in the United States? This is from the mostimportantnews.com. And the article says, in many cities in America, the criminals are starting to gain firm control of the streets. Every week, the horrendous crime wave that is sweeping across America seems to get even worse. In some of our larger cities, looting, murder, and violence are becoming a way of life, and authorities seem powerless to do anything about it. Is this what we can expect life in the United States to look like moving forward? Criminals in California have learned that if they keep the value of the merchandise they steal at each store to under $950, they will be charged with a felony even if they are caught. So now we are witnessing a wave of retail theft that is unlike anything we have ever seen before. In Chicago, this holiday weekend was the most violent weekend that we ever seen in 2021 so far, and that is really saying something. There are certain areas in Chicago that are essentially no-go zones at this point. But of course, the same thing could be said about the worst parts of any other major U.S. city. As I discussed the other day, it is being reported that murder rates in our larger cities were up by an average of 30% in 2020, and as a few weeks ago, they were up another 24% so far in 2021. Ordinary citizens are begging our leaders to do something about this enormous wave of violence, but at this point, nothing seems to be working. If things are this bad now while the U.S. economy is in recovery mode, how about what conditions get when the next severe downturn comes along? It is heartbreaking to watch our society come apart at the seams all around us, and I have a feeling that what we have witnessed so far is just the beginning. All right, so that is really important that we pay attention to it because, you know, as the crime goes up, especially in the major cities with the whole defunding the police and everything like that, now the major corporations like, I think it was CVS or was it Walgreens, one or the other, they have seen such a big jump in people going into the store and just looting it, you know, broad daylight, that they're closing the store a lot earlier and, you know, they have more security, more cameras and everything like that. But the point is that when you have millions of people raiding your stores each and every day, they're going to force you to shut it down. And of course, that's going to make the economy in San Francisco a lot worse. It said karma for those people supporting, you know, defund the police and everything like that. Probably, you know, I would say that maybe they had something to do with the whole BLM last year rioting and everything like that. But the point is that things are going to get more out of hand. Now, do not try to, you know, to take law into your own hands. You know, now I'm going to do a disclaimer from this point on. You know, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. What I'm just doing is I'm commenting on the things that I'm reading on the internet. And the next one is going to be an example for you to really think about. All right, how far are you willing to take all of this? Because even though the crime is surging everywhere, that doesn't mean that the government is not active or it's not working, or, you know, that you will not go to prison if you kill someone or if you hurt someone because they're taking merchandise from your store, or, you know, or something like that. All right, so here's the next headline, and this is from kansascity.com, and the title is Store Clerk Guns Down Shoplifter Over 4 Packs of Red Bull, Indiana cops say. An Indiana gas station clerk chased a shoplifter into the parking lot and shot him in the face. Indianapolis police told local news outlets. Vincent Vibbs, a 49-year-old Speedway convenience store clerk, has been charged with murder, which reported, quote, "We value life over property, so no one's life is worth 4 Red Bulls," end quote. A lawyer who isn't connected to the case told WXIN, explaining Bibb's legal situation. Quote, "In the state of Indiana, you cannot use deadly force to stop someone from stealing property," end quote, the lawyer said, adding that deadly force is only applicable in very limited circumstances. Bibb has also been charged with carrying a handgun without a license, which reported. All right, so here's a predicament for this person, for this 49-year-old person who actually, so this is what happened, all right? When I read the article and everything, you know, I just gathered things that I thought that it's important for you to know, because, you know, I cannot put the entire article, otherwise I would be here for a very long time just reading stuff. But anyways, so what happened is that this person grabbed the 4-pack of Red Bull and he just walked out of the store. The clerk went after him, and the guy got in the car, and the clerk tried to tell him, you know, at gunpoint, to give him back the Red Bulls. But he was about to take off, so he just shot him in the face. And then he just went back inside. He helped the people who were in line, and then he called the police. So, again, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but, you know, some people may say, well, you know, he's a criminal. You cannot just walk into a convenience store or anywhere else and just steal things because you feel like you can, you know, because it's happened in California or whatever. But just know, make sure that you know the law, that you have the right circumstances in your favor. And if you do something like this guy did, that, you know, try to protect his property by killing this guy, you don't also end up in prison. Because believe me, you may be a, you know, Blue Lives Matter, you know, pro-police and everything, which I am also, but I'm not stupid. I know they're going to put my butt in jail, you know, in a heartbeat without any type of remorse if they needed to. All right. So the police is there to do their job, right? To make sure that the citizens are safe in the community. But they're also going to do their job when they have to take you to prison. It doesn't matter how many flags of I support the police are out there, whether or not you have a blue light bulb lighting up your front yard or, you know, your front porch, they're still going to do their job, and they're going to put you in prison, and they're going to throw you in there and not even think about it twice. So that's why you have to make sure that you know the law and that you have the right circumstances in your favor if you do decide to take it to the step where you're actually killing someone over property. All right, so this is the reason why I really do believe that you have to set everything up in your preparedness the way that it's going to work in your favor. All right, so you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do? You know, let's say you do have the 5 to 10 acres, 5 to 20, 5 to 30, whatever acres, and you have your barn, your chickens, your tractor out there and everything like that. And then some type of event like Black Lives Matter happened last year, and they decide to come through the farmland to, you know, do destruction. Do you let them burn your stuff down and, you know, just call the insurance company and try to get it, you know, recovered? Or do you sit there and protect your land? I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but what I would do, you know, if I was in that type of situation, I would be protecting my property. And again, I would make sure that I know the law, that I know exactly what would be the situation that could happen, that if I was taken into prison, all right, I could argue and say that I was protecting my family, I was protecting my property, and that I should not be in prison. You know, just so you know, just because you did the right thing, that doesn't mean that the police is not going to take you in prison and then put you in front of a judge so he can determine whether or not you're free. Okay, so if the police do show up, you know, let's say that people did come through and you do happen to kill someone because, you know, they jumped the fence, they threw a Molotov cocktail or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. And let's say you did kill that person. The police are going to come, and anything you say will be used against you in court. So you shut your mouth. You don't talk to the police until you have the lawyer present. And then from that point on, you follow what the court system does, right? A lot of people think it's unfair. I'm one of those people. In some cases, it is unfair the way that the legal system is done. But, you know, you have to play the game because now you're in it. So that's why you have to make sure that you know your laws, where, you know, when would be a proper time to defend your family using lethal force. And, you know, in most cases, if they break into your house, you have the authority. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just commenting. But if they're in your yard, you cannot shoot them. And if let's say they do break in, but they see your gun and you didn't fire, and they turn around and they run out of your property and you chase them out and kill them out there, then you can be put in prison because you didn't give them the opportunity to get away. You know, it can be very technical and very stupid at times, but make sure that you follow everything. Especially, this is the reason why you need training, because your adrenaline is going to be pumping. You know, you're not going to be in your right mind, and you're just going to react instead of act, and it could put you in a very, you know, bad spot where now you're spending either the rest of your life in prison or 20 to 30 years in prison because of that one event, because, you know, a criminal came into your life and destroyed it. So that's why you have to make sure that you know where you live, where the laws are there, and what would be the proper situation to use lethal force in. All right. So this is the end of the first podcast, because now I'm going to get into what is happening in South Africa and how the 14 categories applies to all of it. All right. And this is going to be the very, very important podcast. So to me, I'm going to continue talking about this. For you, it's going to be a second episode. So this is part 1 of part 2. And I'm going to leave it at that. So let's just recap real fast, in the next few minutes. I showed you what very poor people do and how they live and what those countries do when they have extreme poverty. And then now in this podcast, I showed you that all the major, most wealthiest countries in the same continents, how they live and how they are struggling or going to struggle to feed their family, because, they don't have food shortages yet, but they're getting there, and it's going to be chaotic. And here in the United States, how everything is going up. And you can offset the cost of certain things if you can grow it in your own backyard. But you have to make sure that you take the steps right now, because let's say you try to put a garden down now, the prices of everything might have gone up, and now it's going to be more expensive to take care of those needs. So that's why you have to make sure you do it now before hyperinflation happens. And let's just go back on what happened in Texas. People in Texas, they did not expect the weather to be very, very freezing, to where everybody ran to the store, they ransacked the place, and, now they have to wait a day or two before everything gets replenished. If you would have everything in place already, you wouldn't have suffered the consequences. All right. So you have to make sure that everything gets done before then. Now, the fork on the road is that you can become a leader in your own community. All right. Have this knowledge and tell them, hey, this is what you can do for yourself if crap hits the fan, or otherwise. The bad guys, the cartels, militias, whatever, they're going to take advantage of the situation, and then they're going to try to impose their own authority, or they're going to try to run things, and that can put you in a very particular and dangerous situation. All right. So you have to make sure that you're prepared for that as well. Look at that aspect in things. And now if crime does go up and the police are not doing anything about it, even though the government is still functioning, remember, you cannot take the law in your own hands. You have to make sure that everything is going to be favorable in your position in order for you to still be a free man, even if you have to take someone's life to preserve your family or your own or your property. All right, so make sure you talk to a lawyer, you talk to the police, whatever the case may be, to understand correctly and properly what are the things, what are the steps, what are the situations where you can actually use lethal force and be justified. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave you with that. I want to remind you about the book that I'm giving away for free. You can go to the main page of MammonSurvivalStore.com. You can find the link there. It's going to take you to the place where I'm giving this book away for free. We do need your help with the shipping. The book retails for $24.99 and the shipping is $9.99. So you are in fact getting it for free. The second book that I wrote is still in process. As I mentioned before, I did run out of money, so I'm waiting to get a little more savings so I can finish processing the book, get it printed out, and then when it's available, I will let you know. So it may take me another month before it's available or something like that, but it'll get here when it gets here. And I really do hope that it's very beneficial to you. I would really appreciate it if you can get it, to support this work that I'm doing. And again, the next podcast is really going to prove that everything that I've been teaching you is actually correct. So I would encourage you to stick around, listen to the next podcast. That way you can get the bigger picture and know exactly what to do. All right. So again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.